Maya Johnson tapped her watch and glanced at the departure board once more. Her flight was scheduled to leave in 40 minutes, just enough time to grab a coffee and answer a few urgent emails before boarding. As the CEO of MJ Global Investments, she'd mastered the art of making every minute count. The airport buzzed with the usual mix of excited tourists and hurried business travelers. Maya adjusted her navy blazer and smoothed her curly hair, which she'd recently decided to wear natural instead of straightened. It was one of many small personal changes that reflected her growing confidence in simply being herself, regardless of what others might expect. "Just black, please," she told the barista with a warm smile. While waiting for her coffee, Maya checked her phone and found 3 new messages from her assistant about tomorrow's meeting with potential investors. She'd been working toward this deal for months and everything needed to be perfect. Coffee in hand, Maya walked briskly toward gate B17, her carry-on rolling smoothly behind her. She traveled light, just one small suitcase and her leather laptop bag, a habit from years of frequent flying. At 42, Maya had spent nearly half her life in airports and conference rooms, building her company from a small consulting firm into a major investment group that now had holdings in everything from tech startups to, most recently, an airline. The gate area was already crowded when she arrived. Maya checked her boarding pass on her phone, Group 1, Seat 3A, First Class. She approached the priority line where a few passengers were already queuing. "Good afternoon," she said to the gate agent, a young woman named Tanya, according to her name tag. "First class for Flight 372. Tanya smiled and scanned Maya's digital boarding pass. "All set, Ms. Johnson. We'll begin boarding in about 10 minutes. Have a nice flight." Maya stepped aside and finished her coffee, watching as more passengers filled the waiting area. She noticed a white couple in expensive-looking outfits enter the priority line behind her, followed by a middle-aged Asian man in a business suit. The scene was familiar, comfortable even. After hundreds of flights, the airport routine had become almost soothing in its predictability. When the boarding announcement finally came, Maya gathered her things and moved toward the jet bridge entrance. Tanya scanned her pass again, and Maya was just about to step through when a man's voice called from behind her. "Excuse me, hold on a moment." Maya turned to see a tall man with graying hair at his temples, wearing a pilot's uniform with captain's stripes. His name tag read Capt. R. Barnes. "Is there a problem?" Maya asked, stepping aside to let the line continue moving. Captain Barnes looked at her, then down at a tablet in his hand. "I need to verify something with your ticket. There seem to be some irregularities." Maya raised an eyebrow but maintained her composure. "Irregularities? I just had my boarding pass scanned twice without any issues." "Yes, well, sometimes the system doesn't catch everything," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "What's your final destination today?" "Chicago," Maya answered, watching as the white couple she'd seen earlier walked past them and onto the plane without any questions. "I have a connection to London tomorrow morning." The captain nodded, still looking at his tablet. "And the purpose of your travel?" Maya felt a familiar tightness in her chest, one she hadn't experienced in a while but recognized immediately. She took a slow breath before answering. "Business. I have meetings tomorrow afternoon." "I see," Captain Barnes said. "And did you purchase this ticket yourself, or was it bought for you?" The question hung in the air for a moment. Maya glanced at Tanya, whose uncomfortable expression suggested she recognized what was happening. 2 more passengers, both white men in business attire, walked past them and onto the plane without being stopped. "I purchased it myself," Maya said calmly, though she could feel heat rising to her face.
"Captain Barnes, is there a specific concern about my ticket?"
"Because I have the same boarding pass as everyone else in first class." The captain shifted his weight and finally looked directly at her. "Ma'am, I'm just following security protocols. Sometimes when tickets are purchased at the last minute or through certain channels, we need to perform additional verification." "I booked this flight 3 weeks ago through your airline's website," Maya replied, her voice steady but firm. "And I'm a platinum member of your frequent flyer program." Captain Barnes shrugged slightly. "Even so, I have the authority to perform additional security checks as needed. It shouldn't take long, but you may need to step aside and wait for the next flight while we sort this out." Maya looked around at the other passengers still waiting to board. No one else was being questioned. A young black man in line caught her eye with a look that spoke volumes. He recognized what was happening because he'd likely experienced it himself. "Captain," Maya said, lowering her voice, I'd like to understand exactly what irregularities you're seeing with my ticket that aren't present for other first-class passengers. The pilot's expression hardened. Ma'am, I don't need to explain airline security procedures to passengers. If you have a problem with our protocols, you're welcome to file a complaint or choose another airline in the future. A flight attendant appeared at the jet bridge entrance, looking concerned. Captain, we're almost ready for departure. Is everything all right? Just a small security issue, he replied without looking away from Maya. Ms. Johnson, is it? Ms. Johnson may need to take a later flight. Maya felt her phone vibrate in her pocket. Probably another message about tomorrow's meeting, a meeting she absolutely could not miss. She'd been in situations like this before too many times. Early in her career, she might have gotten angry, raised her voice, given people like Captain Barnes exactly what they expected from her. But experience had taught her different tactics. I understand your concern for security, Captain, she said, maintaining eye contact. However, I need to make this flight for an important business commitment. Perhaps we could speak with a supervisor to resolve this quickly. The flight attendant, whose name tag read Diana, stepped closer. Captain, all other passengers are boarded, and we're scheduled to depart in 12 minutes. Captain Barnes hesitated, looking between Maya and Diana. Fine, Ms. Johnson can board, but I want her luggage checked again before it's stored. My carry-on has already been through security, just like everyone else's, Maya pointed out. And I'm not checking any bags. The captain's jaw tightened. It's standard procedure. For everyone or just for me? Maya asked quietly. Before he could answer, Maya noticed another flight attendant at the jet bridge entrance whisper something to Diana. Diana's eyes widened slightly as she looked at Maya with sudden recognition. Captain, Diana said carefully, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Ms. Johnson is cleared to board immediately. Captain Barnes frowned. I haven't completed my security check. Sir, Diana insisted with unusual firmness, I really think we should allow Ms. Johnson to board now. Maya watched this exchange with interest, noting the shift in dynamics. The captain seemed annoyed by the challenge to his authority, but reluctantly stepped aside. Fine, but I want it noted that I'm doing this under protest, he said. If anything happens, it's not on me. Maya picked up her carry-on, nodded politely to Diana, and walked past Captain Barnes onto the jet bridge. Behind her, she could hear Diana speaking quietly but urgently to the captain. As she approached the airplane door, Maya took out her phone and sent a quick text to her assistant. Looking into Ocean Air's training protocols tomorrow. Schedule a meeting with HR and compliance. Then she tucked her phone away and stepped onto the plane. The same flight attendant who had whispered to Diana greeted her at the door with a nervous smile. Ms. Johnson, welcome aboard. Please let me show you to your seat. Maya followed her to the first-class cabin, aware of the curious glances from passengers who had witnessed the scene at the gate. As she settled into her seat and placed her laptop bag under the seat in front of her, she noticed Captain Barnes boarding the plane, his face flushed with what looked like a mixture of confusion and annoyance. He glanced at her briefly before disappearing into the cockpit, closing the door with a little more force than necessary. Maya took a deep breath and opened her laptop, already thinking about how this incident would shape the changes she planned to implement, changes that Captain Barnes had no idea were coming his way. For now, though she had a flight to catch and a business empire to run, Maya Johnson had not come this far by letting obstacles stop her, and she certainly wasn't going to start today. Maya settled into her first-class seat. Placing her laptop bag beneath the seat in front of her, she could feel the curious glances from nearby passengers who had witnessed the scene at the gate. A flight attendant approached with a practiced smile. Can I get you something to drink before takeoff, Ms. Johnson? Water, please, Maya replied, noticing how the flight attendant's eyes held a hint of recognition. This wasn't unusual. Maya had been featured in several business magazines over the past year, particularly after her investment firm acquired a controlling stake in Ocean Air's parent company. What was unusual was that Captain Barnes clearly had no idea who she was. Maya hadn't announced her ownership position publicly yet. The paperwork had only been finalized 3 months ago, and she'd been quietly assessing operations before making any major changes. Today's flight was part of that assessment, though not quite in the way she had planned. As Maya accepted her water, she noticed the cockpit door open. Captain Barnes emerged, speaking with another flight attendant. His eyes briefly met Maya's before he quickly looked away. The plane should have been pushing back from the gate already, but something was clearly causing a delay. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from her assistant. Regional Director Thompson has been informed of the situation at Gate B-17. He's on his way. Maya put her phone away just as Diana, the flight attendant from earlier, leaned down to speak to her quietly. Ms. Johnson, I want to apologize for what happened at the gate. Captain Barnes wasn't briefed about. Well, about you being on this flight? That's fine, Maya said. I prefer to experience things as they really are, not how people present them when they know I'm watching. Diana nodded, understanding exactly what Maya meant. There's a slight delay with our departure. The regional director has requested to come aboard briefly. I see, Maya said, taking a sip of her water. She wasn't surprised. Word traveled fast in corporate settings, especially when someone in a position of power had been disrespected. A few minutes later, a distinguished-looking man in his 50s hurried down the aisle toward her seat. Thomas Thompson had been with Ocean Air for almost 20 years, working his way up from customer service to regional operations director. Maya had met him twice during the acquisition negotiations. Ms. Johnson, he said, slightly out of breath. I can't begin to express how. Maya raised a hand to stop him. Let's not make a scene, Mr. Thompson. I'm just another passenger today. Thompson glanced around at the curious faces of nearby passengers and lowered his voice. Of course, may I? He gestured to the empty seat beside her. Maya nodded and he sat down, angling his body to speak more privately. I've been informed about the misunderstanding at the gate, he said carefully. Is that what we're calling it? Maya asked, her voice calm but firm. Thompson shifted uncomfortably. Captain Barnes has been with the airline for 15 years with an otherwise excellent record. I'm sure he was just following what he believed to be proper security protocols. Maya looked directly at him. Mr. Thompson, in the 10 minutes I stood at that gate, I watched 12 other first-class passengers board without any questions. None of them looked like me. Thompson's face flushed. He knew exactly what she meant. This isn't about punishing one pilot, Maya continued. It's about recognizing a pattern that affects passengers every day on flights across this country. Passengers who don't own the airline and can't text the regional director when they're treated unfairly. Thompson nodded slowly. What would you like me to do? For now, nothing, Maya said. We have passengers waiting to reach their destinations and I don't want to cause further delays. But I'd like a meeting in my office next Monday. Captain Barnes should be there. Of course, Thompson agreed quickly. Anything else? Maya thought for a moment. Yes, don't tell him who I am. Not yet. Thompson looked surprised but nodded his agreement. As you wish. As he stood to leave, Maya added, one more thing. I'd like to see the passenger complaint records for the past year, categorized by race and gender of the complainant. And the corresponding resolution data. Thompson paused. That might take some time to compile. I'm sure your team can manage it by Monday, Maya said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. After Thompson left to speak with Captain Barnes, Maya noticed the other passengers watching with interest. The white businessman across the aisle leaned toward her. Excuse me, he said, but aren't you Maya Johnson? From the cover of Business Weekly last month. Maya nodded politely. Yes, I am. I thought so, he said, looking impressed. Your article about ethical investing was fascinating. I'm Greg Walsh, by the way. I work in venture capital. Nice to meet you, Greg, Maya replied, shaking his offered hand. If you don't mind me asking, Greg continued, lowering his voice. What was that about at the gate? With the pilot? Maya considered her response carefully. Let's just say it was a learning opportunity. Greg raised his eyebrows. For the pilot or for you? Hopefully for everyone, Maya said. Their conversation was interrupted by the return of Captain Barnes. He walked slowly down the aisle, his face a controlled mask as he approached Maya's seat. Ms. Johnson, he said stiffly, I'd like to apologize for the delay in boarding. We'll be taking off shortly. His words were professional, but his eyes betrayed confusion. He clearly knew something had changed, but not exactly what. Thompson had followed instructions and hadn't revealed Maya's connection to the airline. Thank you, Captain, Maya said simply. Barnes hesitated, clearly expecting more, perhaps anger or demands. When Maya offered nothing else, he nodded awkwardly and returned to the cockpit. The plane finally pushed back from the gate nearly 20 minutes behind schedule. As they taxied toward the runway, Maya opened her laptop and created a new document. She titled it Ocean Air, Equity and Customer Experience Initiative. Over the next hour, as the plane reached cruising altitude and the drink service began, Maya outlined a comprehensive training program addressing unconscious bias and customer dignity. Diana stopped by with a fresh glass of water. "Can I get you anything else, Ms. Johnson?" "No, thank you," Maya said, then added, "Diana, how long have you worked for Ocean Air?" "Almost 7 years now," Diana replied. "And in your experience, how often do incidents like what happened at the gate occur?" Diana glanced around to ensure no other crew members were within earshot. "More often than anyone likes to admit," she said quietly. "Most passengers don't have the resources to make their complaints heard." Maya nodded. "Would you be willing to speak about that at a company meeting?" Honestly and without fear of consequences. Diana looked surprised. Yes, I would. But it might not make me very popular with management. "I think you'll find that management's priorities are about to change," Maya said with a small smile. As Diana moved on to other passengers, Maya returned to her document, adding notes about creating anonymous reporting channels for both staff and passengers. She had built her business reputation on transforming troubled companies. Not just financially, but culturally. Ocean Air would be her biggest challenge yet, and after today's experience, her most personal. The businessman, Greg, spoke up again from across the aisle. "You know, I couldn't help overhearing. Are you planning some kind of consulting work with the airline?" Maya closed her laptop slightly. "Something like that." "Well, they certainly need it," Greg said with a chuckle. "My wife and I fly at least twice a month, and the difference in how she's treated when flying alone versus when she's with me is noticeable." "She's Indian," he added by way of explanation. "Does she report these incidents?" Maya asked. Greg shook his head. "She says it's not worth the effort." "Nothing ever changes." "That's exactly the problem," Maya said. "When people stop reporting because they don't believe anything will change, companies assume everything is fine." Their conversation continued as the flight progressed, with Greg sharing his own experiences in trying to improve diversity at his venture capital firm. Maya found herself taking mental notes, not just for Ocean Air, but for her other business holdings as well. As the plane began its descent into Chicago, Maya received a text from her assistant confirming Monday's meeting with Thompson and Captain Barnes. She also had a message from her legal team about the passenger complaint data she had requested. The process had already begun. Captain Barnes's voice came over the intercom announcing their approach to Chicago. His tone was professional as always, giving no indication of the confrontation earlier or his conversation with the regional director. Maya put away her laptop and looked out the window at the city lights below. She had come to Chicago for a business deal, but she would be leaving with a new mission. It wasn't enough to own companies if she wasn't using that ownership to create meaningful change. As the plane touched down with a gentle bump, Maya thought about Captain Barnes. He didn't know it yet, but his actions today would ultimately affect the experiences of thousands of passengers across the entire airline. Sometimes the most important lessons came from the most uncomfortable moments. The seatbelt sign dinged off, and passengers began gathering their belongings. As Maya stood to retrieve her carry-on from the overhead compartment, she noticed several people watching her with newfound respect, including those who had witnessed the scene at the gate. Word had spread throughout the first-class cabin about who she was. Maya Johnson stepped off the plane into the Chicago terminal, already planning her next move. The standoff might be over, but the real work was just beginning. Monday morning arrived with Chicago's typical bustle. Maya sat in her temporary office on the 42nd floor of a downtown high-rise, reviewing the data her team had compiled over the weekend. The view of Lake Michigan stretched out before her, but her attention was fixed on the troubling patterns revealed in the passenger complaint records. "These numbers confirm what we suspected," said Layla, Maya's chief data analyst, pointing to a chart on her tablet. Black and brown passengers are 3 times more likely to face boarding issues, security random checks, and seating disputes. But the most telling statistic is here. She swiped to another graph, where you can see that complaints from these passengers are 60% less likely to receive satisfactory resolution. Maya nodded, not surprised but still disappointed. "And the employee demographics? Executive leadership is 87% white, middle management is 76% white, and even the flight attendants and ground crew, while more diverse, still don't reflect the passengers they serve in many major hubs, Layla explained. A knock at the door interrupted their discussion. Maya's assistant Patrick entered with a tablet in hand. "Mr. Thompson and Captain Barnes have arrived for your 9 o'clock meeting," he announced. Maya checked her watch. They were 15 minutes early, a good sign that Thompson at least was taking this seriously. "Give me 5 minutes with Layla, then send them in," Maya instructed. After Patrick left, Maya turned to Layla. "I want you to join the meeting. Bring the data, but don't share it unless I ask. I want to hear their perspective first." Layla nodded, understanding Maya's approach. As a black woman in tech before joining Maya's firm, Layla had experienced her share of workplace bias. She knew that confronting people with data before hearing their side could make them defensive rather than receptive. 5 minutes later, Thompson and Barnes entered the office. Thompson looked nervous but professional in a dark blue suit. Barnes wore his pilot's uniform, his captain's stripes gleaming under the office lights. His expression was a mixture of confusion and caution. "Good morning, gentlemen," Maya said, rising to shake their hands. "Thank you for coming. Please have a seat." They settled into the chairs across from her desk, with Layla taking a seat slightly to the side, tablet ready. "Ms. Johnson again. I want to express how seriously we're taking the incident on Friday," Thompson began. "I've personally reviewed," Maya held up her hand. "Before we go further, I believe introductions are in order. Captain Barnes and I met briefly, but I don't think we were properly introduced." Barnes straightened in his chair. "Yes, ma'am. Captain Richard Barnes, senior pilot with Ocean Air for 15 years. Maya nodded. "Maya Johnson, CEO of MJ Global Investments," she paused, letting the information sink in before adding, "and majority shareholder of Horizon Group, which, as of 3 months ago, is the parent company of Ocean Air." The color drained from Barnes's face as realization dawned. His eyes darted to Thompson, who gave a small confirming nod. "You," Barnes started, then stopped, clearly recalibrating everything in his mind. "You own the airline?" "I do," Maya confirmed simply, "though I've kept a low profile while assessing operations before making any major changes." Barnes swallowed hard. "Ms. Johnson, if I had known—" "That's exactly the problem, Captain," Maya interrupted gently. "You shouldn't need to know who I am to treat me, or any passenger, with dignity and respect." The office fell silent. Thompson shifted uncomfortably in his seat while Barnes seemed frozen, processing the implications of what had happened. "I'm not here to fire you," Maya continued, her voice level. "That would be easy, but it wouldn't solve the underlying issues." Barnes visibly relaxed, though his face remained flushed with embarrassment. "Instead," Maya said, "I want to understand what happened from your perspective, Captain. Walk me through your thought process at Gate B-17 on Friday." Barnes took a deep breath. "I was doing my pre-flight checks when I received a security flag on a first-class passenger. The system occasionally flags tickets for verification, especially last-minute bookings or unusual travel patterns. My ticket was purchased 3 weeks in advance through your website," Maya pointed out, "and I fly this route approximately once a month. I didn't check those details," Barnes admitted. "I saw the flag and acted on it." "And did you question any other passengers that day? Or on previous flights when you've received such flags?" Barnes hesitated. "Not personally, no. Usually the gate agents handle those issues. So why did you come out to the gate specifically for me?" Maya pressed. The question hung in the air. Thompson looked like he wanted to interject but held back. Finally, Barnes spoke. "I can't say for certain. I saw the flag and something made me decide to handle it personally." "That something is what we're here to discuss," Maya said. She turned to Layla. "Would you please share the overview data now?" Layla nodded and tapped her tablet, sending the statistics to the large screen on the wall. The racial disparities in passenger complaints and resolutions appeared in stark, colorful graphs. "This is 3 years of your own passenger data," Maya explained. "Not my interpretation, not external accusations, just the patterns in how different passengers experience ocean air services." Barnes stared at the screen, his expression shifting from defensive to troubled as he absorbed the information. "I've never singled anyone out because of their race," he said finally, his voice firm but less confident than before. "Most bias isn't conscious or intentional," Maya replied. "That's what makes it so difficult to address. We make split-second decisions based on associations and assumptions we don't even realize we're carrying." Thompson leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing, Ms. Johnson?" Maya stood and walked to the window, gathering her thoughts before turning back to face them. A complete overhaul of training, reporting, and accountability systems, she said, not as punishment but as improvement. Ocean Air can become an industry leader in equitable customer experience, but only if we're honest about where we're starting from. She pressed a button on her desk and Patrick entered with 3 tablets, distributing them to everyone in the room. This is a draft of the Equity in Flight initiative I've been developing. I'd like both of you to review it and provide your input, especially on the pilot training components, Captain Barnes. Barnes looked surprised as he accepted the tablet. You want my input? I do, Maya confirmed. You have 15 years of experience and respect among the pilot corps. If this initiative is going to succeed, we need advocates who understand both the problem and the culture we're trying to change. Barnes scrolled through the document slowly, his expression unreadable. Thompson was already taking notes on his copy, clearly seeing the business implications. This is comprehensive, Thompson said, sounding impressed despite himself. Maya nodded. It has to be. Half measures won't create lasting change. Barnes looked up from the tablet. Ms. Johnson, I want to say something, and I hope you'll take it as sincere. He paused, carefully choosing his words. I'm deeply sorry for how I treated you on Friday. Seeing this data, it's forcing me to reconsider interactions I've had throughout my career. Interactions I justified to myself in various ways. The admission clearly wasn't easy for him, and Maya appreciated the honesty. Thank you, Captain. That self-reflection is exactly what this initiative hopes to encourage in everyone, from executives to ground staff. Barnes set the tablet down and straightened his shoulders. I'd like to help implement this program. Not just review it, but actively support it. Maya smiled, the first genuine smile since the meeting began. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. Thompson looked between them, clearly relieved that the meeting was taking a constructive turn, rather than becoming a termination discussion. Should we schedule a follow-up to discuss implementation timelines? He suggested. Yes, Maya agreed. But first, I'd like Captain Barnes to join me for a walk through the terminal downstairs. Barnes looked confused. The terminal? I want you to observe something with me, Maya explained. It's important that you see what I see when I travel. 30 minutes later, Maya and Captain Barnes stood near a busy security checkpoint at Chicago O'Hare. They watched as travelers moved through the lines, some breezing through while others were pulled aside for additional screening. Just observe for 10 minutes, Maya said quietly. Tell me what patterns you notice. Barnes watched intently, his pilot's observant nature taking in details. After several minutes, his expression changed as recognition dawned. The additional screenings, he said softly. They're not random at all, Maya nodded. Now imagine experiencing that every time you fly, plus additional scrutiny at the gate, skepticism from flight attendants about your seat assignment, and the constant need to be extra polite so no one sees you as difficult. Barnes continued watching, now seeing the airport experience through new eyes. I never realized. I knew these things happened, but seeing it so clearly. This is why the initiative matters, Maya said. It's not about blame or punishment. It's about finally seeing the reality that some passengers have always lived with, and doing something about it. As they walked back toward the office building, Barnes was quieter, more thoughtful. I'd like to share something with you, he said finally. When Mr. Thompson told me I was meeting with an investment executive about Friday's incident, I came prepared to defend myself. I was going to argue that I was just following protocol, that it wasn't about race. He shook his head slowly. But standing there watching that security line just now, I can't say that anymore. Not honestly. Maya stopped walking and turned to face him. Captain Barnes, the hardest part of creating change is acknowledging the need for it. You've already taken that step, which puts you ahead of most people. For the first time since they'd met, Barnes looked at Maya, really looked at her, not as a passenger to be questioned or as the owner of his company, but as a person with experiences he needed to understand. I'm ready to learn, he said simply. Maya nodded. Then let's get to work. 2 weeks after their meeting in Chicago, Maya stood before a room of 50 Ocean Air executives and senior staff members. The company's headquarters in Atlanta featured a spacious conference room with large windows overlooking the airport runways, where planes took off and landed in a constant rhythm. Thank you all for being here today, Maya began, surveying the room. The audience was predominantly white and male, with just a handful of women and people of color scattered throughout. A visual confirmation of the diversity issues her data had revealed. By now, you've all received the outline of the Equity in Flight initiative, she continued. Today we'll discuss implementation timelines and address your questions. From the front row, Captain Barnes nodded encouragingly. In the 14 days since their walk through O'Hare, he had become an unexpected ally, reviewing training materials and offering practical insights from his years on the flight deck. His transformation wasn't miraculous. He still asked awkward questions sometimes, but his willingness to learn had impressed Maya. Thompson sat beside him, more cautious but equally engaged. The regional director had quickly recognized which way the winds were blowing and adjusted his sails accordingly. Before we dive into specifics, Maya said, I'd like to address something important. This initiative isn't about pointing fingers or assigning blame. It's about recognizing patterns that have gone unnoticed for too long and creating systems to address them. She clicked to the next slide, showing passenger satisfaction rates broken down by demographics. When certain groups consistently report worse experiences, that's not coincidence, it's a pattern. And patterns can be changed with awareness and concrete action. A hand went up near the back of the room, a middle-aged white man in a crisp blue suit. Ms. Johnson, he said when Maya acknowledged him, I'm David Parker, VP of Operations. While I appreciate your enthusiasm, I have concerns about implementation costs. Our profit margins are already tight, and these programs would require significant investment. Maya had expected this objection. Mr. Parker, I understand your concern. Let me address it directly. She clicked to a new slide showing financial projections. These are the estimated costs of the initiative over 3 years. Murmurs rippled through the room as executives registered the substantial figures. And these, Maya continued, revealing the next slide, are the current costs of our customer service issues. Complaint handling, rebookings due to missed connections from delays at security or gates, social media response teams, and legal settlements from discrimination cases. The room grew quiet as the numbers spoke for themselves. The costs of doing nothing were actually higher than the investment required for change. We're not just doing this because it's right, Maya explained. We're doing it because it's also good business. Happy passengers become loyal customers. Diverse teams make better decisions. Inclusive policies reduce turnover and legal risks. Parker seemed surprised by the thoroughness of her analysis but nodded in acknowledgement. Now, Maya said, I'd like to introduce someone who can speak to the frontline experience. She gestured toward the door where Diana, the flight attendant from her Chicago flight, entered with another colleague. This is Diana Chen and Luis Rodriguez, flight attendants with 15 years of combined experience. They've generously agreed to share insights from their daily interactions with passengers. Diana stepped forward, visibly nervous but determined. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. As flight attendants, we see firsthand how different passengers experience air travel. We notice which passengers get questioned about their seat assignments, which ones receive extra scrutiny, and which ones are assumed to need help even when they don't. Luis nodded. We also see how these small interactions affect the entire flight experience. A passenger who has been made to feel unwelcome at the gate often remains anxious throughout the flight, affecting everyone around them. Their honest testimony resonated with the room in ways that charts and data couldn't. Maya watched as executives who had seemed skeptical leaned forward with interest. Captain Barnes raised his hand. I'd like to add something, if I may. Maya nodded, curious about what he wanted to contribute. Barnes stood, turning to face his colleagues. 2 weeks ago, I was the problem this initiative aims to solve. I stopped Ms. Johnson from boarding a flight based on a security flag that I never verified, never questioned, and never applied to any other passenger that day. A murmur went through the room. While many had heard rumors about the incident, hearing Barnes admit it directly was powerful. I've been flying for Ocean Air for 15 years, he continued, and I've always prided myself on professionalism and safety. But when Ms. Johnson asked me to observe a security checkpoint with her, I saw patterns I'd never noticed before, patterns that matched my own behavior. The room was completely silent now, every person focused on Barnes's words. I'm not standing here because I'm being forced to, he said. I'm here because I've realized that being a good pilot and a good employee means recognizing when our systems and our own instincts need recalibration. Bayer hadn't expected this level of advocacy from Barnes. His willingness to be vulnerable with his peers spoke volumes about his genuine commitment to change. After Barnes sat down, the meeting shifted to practical matters, training schedules, policy updates, and reporting mechanisms. Maya noticed how the energy in the room had changed, with more executives actively participating and offering suggestions. 3 hours later, as the meeting concluded, Maya found herself surrounded by executives with questions and ideas. Some were clearly just trying to impress the new owner, but others seemed genuinely engaged with the initiative's goals. Parker, the VP who had raised concerns about costs, approached her last. "Ms. Johnson, I have to admit I came in skeptical today, but your presentation was compelling, especially the financial analysis." "Thank you, Mr. Parker. I hope we can count on your support as we move forward." He nodded. "You'll have it. And I'd like to offer my team's assistance with implementation logistics. We're good at making complicated things happen on schedule." "I appreciate that," Maya said, recognizing the value of having operations on board. As the room emptied, Diana and Luis approached with Thompson and Barnes. "That went better than I expected," Thompson admitted. "I was worried about resistance from the old guard." Maya smiled. "People can surprise you when you give them the chance. Captain Barnes is proof of that." Barnes looked slightly embarrassed but pleased. "I just spoke the truth, and I've been thinking about the next steps. The pilot training modules need to be integrated into our existing safety protocols, not treated as separate sensitivity training that people can mentally file away." "That's an excellent point," Maya agreed. "We want this to become part of how everyone does their job, not an add-on." Diana glanced at her watch. "I should go. I have a flight to Denver in 2 hours." "Before you go," Maya said, "I wanted to thank you both for speaking today. Your perspectives made a real difference." Luis smiled. It felt good to be heard. That doesn't happen often at these corporate meetings. After they left, Maya gathered her materials while Barnes helped Thompson with some notes. "You know," Barnes said casually, "the pilot's quarterly meeting is next month. It would send a strong message if you attended." Maya considered this. "Would my presence help or hinder your advocacy with them?" Barnes thought for a moment. Some might be defensive at first, but seeing the person behind the initiative would make it real for them. "Right now it's just policies on paper." "Then I'll be there," Maya decided. "But I'd like you to lead the discussion." Barnes looked surprised. "Me?" "Yes. You've experienced this journey from skepticism to understanding. That makes you the perfect messenger." As they left the conference room, Maya's phone buzzed with a news alert. She checked it and paused mid-step. "Everything okay?" Thompson asked. Maya showed them the screen. An industry news article with the headline, "Ocean Air Owner Launches Groundbreaking Equity Initiative After Experiencing Discrimination on Own Airline." "How did they get this story?" Barnes asked, looking concerned. "In a room of 50 executives, someone was bound to talk to the press," Maya said, scrolling through the article. "Actually, this is quite accurate." "They must have spoken to someone who was in the meeting." Thompson frowned. "Will this cause problems for the rollout?" "On the contrary," Maya replied. "This public accountability might be exactly what we need. Now we have to deliver on our promises." As they walked through the headquarters building toward the exit, Maya noticed employees watching her with curious expressions. Word had spread quickly. A young black woman at the reception desk smiled at Maya as she passed. The small gesture of recognition reminded Maya why this work mattered, not just for her experience as an airline owner, but for every passenger who just wanted to travel with dignity. Outside, as they waited for their cars, Barnes seemed lost in thought. "Something on your mind, Captain?" Maya asked. "I was just thinking about that flight 2 weeks ago," he said. "If I hadn't stopped you at the gate that day, then we wouldn't be standing here now about to change an entire airline," Maya finished for him. "Sometimes the most difficult moments lead to the most important opportunities." Barnes nodded. "I've flown planes through storms many times, Ms. Johnson, but I think this journey we're on now might be the most important flight of my career." As her car arrived, Maya thought about how far they'd come in just 2 weeks, and how much further they still had to go. The initiative was now public, the commitment made. The real work of transformation was just beginning. 6 months later, Maya stood in the bustling atrium of Ocean Air's headquarters, surrounded by employees, industry representatives, and media. A large banner hung overhead. Equity in Flight, 6 months of progress. Digital screens displayed before and after statistics that told a story of real change. When we launched this initiative, Maya said into the microphone, many people doubted it would make a measurable difference. They called it a PR move or suggested that changing deeply ingrained behaviors was impossible. She paused, looking around at the diverse faces in the crowd. Today, the numbers speak for themselves. Behind her, a screen showed customer satisfaction scores that had risen across all demographic groups, with the most significant improvements among passengers of color. Complaint rates had dropped by 27%, and employee retention had improved, especially among diverse staff members. But numbers only tell part of the story. Maya continued. The real change is happening in daily interactions at check-in counters, security lines, boarding gates, and in the air. She gestured to a group of employees standing nearby, pilots, flight attendants, gate agents, and ground crew members wearing new pins that read, Equity Ambassador. Captain Barnes stood among them, now the official pilot coordinator for the initiative. These ambassadors have led the transformation within their teams, proving that change doesn't just come from the top. It happens when people at every level commit to doing better. As Maya stepped aside, Thompson approached the podium. In the months since the initiative began, he had become one of its strongest champions, recognizing that his own career advancement was now tied to its success. 6 months ago, Thompson said, I worried this program would create division within our company. Instead, it's brought us together with a shared purpose. Our employees report higher job satisfaction because they're empowered to treat every passenger with the same level of respect and care. The crowd applauded as Thompson introduced the next speaker, a surprise to many in the audience. Captain Richard Barnes has a unique perspective on our journey, Thompson explained. He's agreed to share it with us today. Barnes approached the microphone with the confident posture of someone used to commanding a plane but spoke with the humility of a person who had undergone genuine reflection. 6 months ago, I made a mistake that could have ended my career, he began. I stopped a passenger from boarding based on assumptions I didn't even realize I was making. The room grew quiet. Though the story had become well known within the company, hearing Barnes discuss it directly still carried power. That passenger turned out to be Maya Johnson, who had recently acquired our airline. But here's the thing. He looked directly at the audience. It shouldn't have mattered who she was. Every person deserves the same respect, whether they own the company or are flying for the first time, he continued, describing the training programs he'd helped develop and the conversations he'd had with fellow pilots who were initially skeptical but gradually came around. The most common question I get from other pilots is, how do we do this without compromising safety? Barnes said. My answer is always the same. Real safety comes from good judgment based on facts, not from assumptions based on appearance. When we remove bias from our decision-making, we actually become safer pilots. As Barnes returned to his seat, Maya noticed several industry executives in the audience taking notes. The Ocean Air initiative had attracted attention across the airline industry, with competitors watching closely to see if it would succeed or fail. Maya returned to the podium to introduce the next speakers, Diana and Luis, who had been promoted to lead a new passenger advocacy team. They shared stories from the front lines, examples of how the new training and reporting systems had changed real interactions with passengers. Last month, Diana explained, a gate agent noticed a pattern of random security checks happening to passengers with Middle Eastern names. Instead of staying quiet, she used our new reporting system to flag the pattern. Within hours, our team had reviewed the data, confirmed the issue, and implemented additional oversight. Luis nodded. The old culture was don't rock the boat. The new culture is speak up when something's wrong. That change didn't happen overnight, but it's making a real difference. After the formal presentations, the event shifted to a reception where employees and guests mingled freely. Maya moved through the crowd, listening more than talking, gauging the authentic reactions rather than just the official responses. Near the refreshment table, she overheard two flight attendants in conversation. Remember how we used to handle seat assignment disputes? One was saying. We'd always assume the person of color was in the wrong seat. I know, the other replied. I'm still embarrassed about how many times I asked black passengers in first class to show their boarding pass, when I never did that with white passengers. At least we're doing better now, the first one said. I caught myself making that same assumption last week and stopped before I said anything. The training actually works if you pay attention. Maya smiled to herself, moving on without interrupting their honest conversation. These small changes in everyday thinking were exactly what the initiative had hoped to achieve. Across the room, she spotted Parker, the VP of Operations who had initially questioned the program's costs. He was deep in conversation with representatives from another airline. The ROI has actually exceeded our projections, he was explaining. Fewer complaints mean fewer rebookings and compensation payouts. Better employee retention means lower training costs. And we're seeing an increase in repeat business from demographics we were losing before. Maya appreciated his focus on the business case. For some leaders, moral arguments weren't enough. They needed to see the financial benefits to fully commit. As the event wound down, Barnes approached with an industry magazine in hand. Have you seen this? He asked, showing her the cover story. Oceanair's Equity Revolution, a new standard for the industry. Maya took the magazine, skimming the article that described their initiative as groundbreaking. They make it sound easier than it was, she commented with a smile. Still is, Barnes corrected her. We've made progress, but we're not done. True, Maya agreed. Change isn't an event, it's a process. They were interrupted by a young black woman in a pilot's uniform who approached somewhat nervously. Ms. Johnson? I'm Zoe Williams, first officer on the Dallas route. I just wanted to thank you personally. Maya shook her hand. It's nice to meet you, Zoe, but why the thanks? Before the initiative, I was considering leaving Ocean Air, Zoe explained. I was tired of passengers asking if I was really the pilot or making jokes about being on the wrong plane when they saw me in the cockpit. The company never seemed to take it seriously, she glanced at Barnes. But after Captain Barnes started the new training programs and made it clear that those comments weren't acceptable, things changed. Other pilots started backing me up instead of laughing along. Barnes looked both proud and slightly embarrassed. First Officer Williams is being modest. She's actually helping us develop the next phase of training materials. After Zoe left to catch her flight, Maya and Barnes walked toward the exit together. You know, Maya said, when I bought this airline, I was thinking about profit margins and market expansion. I never expected to be leading a social change initiative. Sometimes the most important journeys aren't on our flight plan, Barnes replied. Outside, as evening settled over the city, Maya paused to look back at the headquarters building, now lit up with the Ocean Air logo. Employees were leaving in groups, still buzzing with conversation from the event. There's something I've been meaning to ask you, Barnes said. That day at the gate, did you know who I was when I stopped you? Maya shook her head. No, I was flying like any other passenger. I wanted to experience the airline as it really was, not how people would present it to the owner. So you could have just shown your ID, explained who you were, and walked right on board. I could have, Maya agreed, but then nothing would have changed. Sometimes you have to experience the problem to understand how to fix it. Barnes nodded thoughtfully. What's next for the initiative? Phase 2, Maya said, pulling out her phone to show him a draft document. We're expanding beyond our own airline. Industry-wide standards, shared training resources, collaborative data tracking across carriers. Ambitious, Barnes commented. Necessary, Maya corrected. Because the ultimate goal isn't just to fix Ocean Air, it's to change how everyone experiences air travel. As they parted ways that evening, Maya reflected on the journey that had been